Pitt Rivers Museum is part of Oxford University, and Oxford University is typically considered one of the most prestigious universities in the world. I was once encouraged to go to Oxford by a bunch of different adults who were in my life at the time during my teenage years, but I always thought that I didn't want to spend 4 years of my life living amongst communists. Anyway, the Pitt Rivers Museum just removed its famous collection of shrunken heads and human remains from display. You see, it's seeking to decolonize its collection. That's their word. You see, when the British Empire was a thing, there was a considered effort to collect artifacts from various civilizations around the world to essentially keep records, to preserve history in the event that these cultures changed, as they would, of course. In fact, many of the tribes from which they collected artifacts didn't collect records of their own. They didn't create records. Didn't know what happened just in the last generation, in fact. It was that bad. Well now, museum staff spent the 2020 summer removing 120 human remains from display, including the South American Sansa, also known as the shrunken heads, Naga trophy heads, and an Egyptian mummy of a child, all of which now went into hidden storage. What's interesting is why. The director of the museum, her name is Laura van Broekhoven. She says, and I quote, "Our audience research has shown that visitors often saw the museum's displays of human remains as a testament to other cultures being savage, primitive, or gruesome," unquote. In other words, they're hiding the history of these cultures so people don't think that they were savage or brutal. Let's talk about those shrunken heads for a minute, okay? In fact, they're not really shrunken heads, they're shrunken faces, sort of. Let me just describe to you how a shrunken head is made, and you just tell me if it's savage or not. First, they decapitate someone, they take his head off, alright? Then, they make a slit in the neck and up the back of the severed head. Then they peel the skin. I'm trying to make this non-gruesome, it's hard. They peel the skin and hair away from the skull, sort of like a scalping, I guess. And then they discard the skull and the brains. Then when they've got this face thing, they sew the eyelids shut. Then they skewer the lips closed with wooden pegs. They take this fleshy ball and they simmer it in water, in hot water, for about an hour and a half. It's important to not go too long, else the whole thing falls apart, and you have to go long enough to make sure that the skin shrivels up. It's apparently a precise process. I wouldn't know, I haven't done it. But in any case, after the skin is all dark and rubbery, they take it out, and then they put hot stones on the inside in order to produce the same sort of effect on the inside of this face, where it's kind of like tanned and rubbery, and it saves better. Then, they're not done, then they make a hole in the top of this head, we'll call it a head. They make a hole in the top of it so then they can put a string through it, and then they can put it around their necks as a trophy. So what do you think? Savage? Yes or no? Some tribes gave them to their children as toys. Others used them to scare away their enemies, and yet others used them in pagan ceremonies. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and call it as savage. Not all cultures are evil, and not all cultures are good. I should say not all cultures are equal, as I meant to say. In any case, I think that part of the best person who demonstrated this was actually Carl Benjamin, who's also a video creator, otherwise known as Sargon of Akkad. He created this video series called All Cultures Are Beautiful, and if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. It's hilarious, and it parodies the dark side of multiculturalism. Anyway, getting back to this director of the museum, Laura van Broekhoven, she said, and I quote, "Rather than enabling our visitors to reach a deeper understanding of each other's ways of being, the displays reinforced racist and stereotypical thinking that goes against the museum's values today," unquote. Is the truth racist? Or stereotypical? Is history racist? I mean, the truth can't be racist, right? It is simply the truth, and that's all. And let's just think about this, right? She wanted people to have a deeper understanding of each other's ways of being. That's what she claims. But do you think that's true? Do you really believe it? Because I don't. Like, for example, what if I made a shrunken head today? Would Laura consider it acceptable? What if I, to try and create the best equivalence, took the head from someone killed by our armed forces, maybe in the Middle East, took one of their victims, took his head, and then, you know, tried to scalp him and remove his face and take his skull out and throw it away and then boil it, and then eventually when I'm done desecrating this corpse, hang this head around my neck as a trophy? Do you think Laura would think that was acceptable? I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. Or is it only acceptable if a foreign person does it, if a non-white, non-colonial person does it? Because the real conclusion of the museum's pieces were that the influence of white Christian nations was actually good. That colonization to some degree was good. And by the way, not all white culture throughout history has been good. You won't find me defending the Druids of ancient England, which were civilized and became more moral after Roman invasion. More godly, one might say. But culture matters. Not all cultures are good. And leftists are moving us toward an age where we can't even declare evil to be evil. This is the perversion of moral relativism, where we can't describe something as savage when it is. And colonialism nowadays is always seen as bad, because of political correctness. It's always absolutely bad, and anybody who defends it in any way is racist. Why? Well, because college professors, essentially, and other Marxists, cultural Marxists, have determined that since colonization was predominantly done by white people, by white civilizations, that it's therefore bad, that it's associated with whiteness, and whiteness is bad. Because the current fad amongst these cultural Marxists is one of anti-white racism. Anything predominantly practiced by white people is bad. In America, colonization was actually seen as bad for different reasons, because of American history, because of the American Revolution, right? The separation from England, the fact that America no longer wanted to be a colony and wasn't let go properly. And so that kind of resentment toward colonization was actually appropriate, made sense. But there's a lot of colonization that was good. And it was once recognized that it's a complex topic and that colonization did do some good. This was once held as kind of accepted in England, but no longer is because of that political correctness that I already described. The truth is that colonization for most civilizations did more good for the people that it affected in the world. It brought law, medicine, technology, architecture, and perhaps most importantly, the Christian faith, to dark corners of the world that had never encountered these things. And now history has been rewritten, and is still being rewritten. Leftists seek to remove statues, to remove objects from museums, and they're rewriting history books as we speak. They're trying to rewrite history to make Western civilization the villain, and these savage tribes as oppressed noblemen that they weren't. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.